And also everything about wisdom or whatever. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure again to be here with you, to share some moments of Torah together. And may I add that the zchut of us learning together should be for all the hostages still held in Gaza, all those fighting for us, on our behalf, and also for all those that need the refuah shlema, who had the refuah shlema because. Right. So I was thinking about what to mention at this time, and I thought there is a single sentence in this week's parsha that summarizes Jewish identity, and it's also the most famous pasuk in the entire Torah, which is Naaseh v'nishma. Everyone knows. So I would like to delve a bit more in this particular pasuk and what it means to us. So I'll start with a piece of midrash. Chazal, our rabbis say in Sechet Shabbat Daf Peichet, when Am Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma, HaKadosh Baruch Hu was kind of surprised and he said, Mi gim araz zeh lebonai, who revealed this hint to my children, such a malachei sharet mishtamshim bo, a secret that only the angels, the celestial court, use. Because it is said in Tehillim, nishmua bekol devar. Once they do what Kadosh Baruch Hu says, and then they nishmua bekol devar, then they try to listen to what Kadosh Baruch Hu said. So I would like to focus a bit on the second part, on the part of Nishma. What does it mean? We are going to listen. In Hebrew, there are two possible explanations or interpretations for the verb Nishmoa. The most obvious one, Nishmoa, to hear. If somebody talks to you, unless you hear it, you're not going to be able to follow the conversation. Is the nishma, as in hearing, what we mean in this pasuk? Apparently not. And why is that so? For a very simple reason. Physically, it's impossible to do anything to anyone unless you hear that first. Independently of how dedicated you are to someone, if you don't listen to what they have to say, you can't do anything. So it cannot be that the nishma that we said then, and we still say today, it means to hear. Because it's impossible. You need first to listen, then you know what to do. So there is a second explanation to the word lishmoa, and that is brought in Bereshis. When Joseph took his brothers to jail, to prison, and he told them they had to leave one of them behind. Then they would go back to Yaakov with the food they needed. They started regretting selling the brother as a slave. And then they said, we are guilty for we mistreated our brother. And the Torah tells us, they did not know that Yosef was listening. Now, Yosef was just right there. Of course he was listening. What does it mean that Yosef, they didn't know Yosef was listening? So Rashi explains, they didn't know he understood them. So, because there was there an interpreter between them, they didn't know he actually understood every single word that they said. So lishmoa, it also means listen, but with an intention to understand something. And that explained to us, for example, the most famous pasuk in the entire Torah, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, means listen, but with the intention to understand that Hashem, our God, is only one. So Nishma in this case means to understand. Now, there have been a different approach between the Jewish nation and the other nations when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to give us the Torah. We know already that Am Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma. Other nations said something slightly different. And we know that because at the end of the Torah, Sichas Torah, we read that every year. Hashem misinai ba v'zorach b'seir lamo. Hashem came from Mount Sinai, and he came from all different locations. And Rashi points out that Kadosh Baruch Hu took the Torah to the neighboring nations, and he offered those nations the Torah, and they said something. What they said was, Torah Zu, the Torah that you're going to give us, maksiv ba, what's written there? So to one nation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, it's written, Leisirtzach, you should not murder. And that particular nation said, that's not for us. To another nation, HaKadosh Baruch Hu told them, Ksiv leisinach, they should not be immoral. And that nation also said, that's not for us. There is a different interesting approach between the Jewish nation that we said immediately, Naaseh v'nishma, and the other nations. They first, let me listen what you have to say, let me see if it's good enough for me, then I'll make a decision. Before I answer that question, I want to bring a bit more of additional information into this, and it is the following. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us the Torah, he gives us three types of commandments: Edot, Chukim, Umishpatim. And it's brought at the end of Parashat Vayetchanan, when the Torah lists the She'ela that the wise son says in the Seder night. The Torah says, Ma edot ha-chukim ve'mishpatim asher tziva Hashem Elokeinu eschem. What are the edot, the testimonies, the chukim, the decrees, and the mishpatim, and the laws that Hashem has given you? What are those three types of mitzvot, and what it teaches us in the way we relate to Kadosh Baruch Hu and this bond? So Nachmanides Ramban explains it there. The edot is a mitzvah that actually in itself has got, rationalistically speaking at least, no reason at all. But because it comes to remind us of something that happened in the past, then we say, oh, that makes sense. For example, we just put on tefillin. Tefillin in itself, to wrap ourselves with some leather, with some parchments in the boxes, it's not necessarily rational, but because we know it's Zecher Metzias Mitzrayim, then we do it. Makes sense. Now, there is a second type of mitzvot, and that is chukim, decrees. That these are mitzvot that make no sense at all, and there is no explanation given, not even to symbolize, to remind us of anything else. For example, kashrus, all different laws of kashrus, all different laws of shatnez, putting a cloth that has linen and wool together. There's no reason at all. It's simply Hashem said, and we do because Hashem said so. And the last bit, the mitzvot that we are most attracted to, mishpatim, laws. And these are the mitzvahs that make sense, like not stealing, for example, not murdering, not speaking lashon hara about someone else. These are mitzvot that if Hashem hasn't given them to us, we would have come with those mitzvot ourselves and would have kept them. Now, what that has to do with what I said before about the different nations asking what the Torah tells us, and I'm saying that even those mitzvot, the mishpatim, what I may come up with a conclusion, and this might seem rational to me, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be rational to you. and you might completely disagree with what I say. And the most famous example of that is Ein be'Ein. One eye per eye, or one hand per hand. We see this repeatedly in this week's parsha and in other parashiot as well. If someone chas v'shalom causes a permanent injury on someone else, he has to reimburse the damage made, and that's what the Torah explains what ayin be'ayin means. However, and it's one of the most ancient codes of law. If you look at the Hammurabi, one of the earliest codes of law that have existed, it says ayin be'ayin, kipshuto, ayin be'ayin, one eye per eye. That's literal. If someone took someone else's eye, chas v'shalom, same has to happen to him, etc. So even those mitzvot that are rational, I'm not sure that everyone will have the same conclusion. Because of that, the Midrash says something very interesting. And he said that in Parashas Kedoshim. Omar ben Azariah said, I'll tell you, don't say, I can't eat pork. I can't dress with sharpness. I can't be immoral, chas v'shalom. You could if you had a choice, but you shouldn't do lama. If she could do, Maya said, why I can't do it? Hashem said so. Meaning, the only reason why I'm doing this mitzvah or that mitzvah independently, whether I understand or not, is simply for the reason that Hashem has said so. It's important because sometimes people ask us, especially if we go into the wider world and we have work relationships with other people of other faiths, they ask, why you do this, why you do this? Hashem has. The Bible itself, so that's what we do. So it comes down to receiving Hashem's yoke, what we call kabbalatong, meaning trying to form a relationship. And there are three rational relationships that human beings can form with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we mention that every single Shabbos in Shachos. We say, we say, Hashem hasn't given it legoye arotzos. Hashem hasn't given the Torah to those who dwell in the earth. Chazal say those who dwell in the earth, but they only look downwards to earth. They don't look up to heaven. They don't look up for Shemayim, meaning they have no interest in spirituality whatsoever. That's one approach. Second approach is Hashem hasn't given the Torah to those who worship idols. What is idol worship? Now, in its infancy or in its beginning, idol worship was, and the Rambam explains that at the beginning of Halachos of Avodah Zarah, it simply means that they felt that God was too high in heaven to have any interest in what's happening in this world. So therefore, we shouldn't worship HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we should leave it up there in the high spheres, and we should worship those who are able to give us something. There's a give and take relationship with the kind of middlemen in the celestial court, and that's how idol worship started, meaning they know about Hashem's existence, but they don't necessarily have any interest in pursuing a relationship. And the last one, we say, in Shabbat rest, those who have an orna are not going to dwell. Orna in Hebrew means peeling, a separation, something that makes it an interruption between two things. It means those that believe Hashem is in this world, is present, has an interest, but is not the Baal of ice. What we do, we choose to do, also have an influence on what's happening. Hashem kind of can't do everything on his own. So these are the three approaches that humanity have in getting some sort of relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what do we do? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave that whether to establish a relationship with him or not, based simply on a bond to human beings. And where do we know that from? When Hashem said, let's make a man in our image, the Medrash, Bereshis Rabbah, Parashat Chet, said the following. Moshe tells God, why are you complicating things? Right is Adam. You're the only one who can do that. Says Hashem to Moshe, no. So, right the way I'm telling you, anyone who wants to make a mistake, let him make the mistake. Meaning, I'm leaving, this is what I'm saying. I'm leaving the choice to human beings. Whoever wants to come closer can come closer. Whoever wants to be distant, that's his loss. Now, how do we approach HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives? How do we let him in? So that's and with that I'm going to finish. There's a cute story, a beautiful story with the Ger Rebbe. Once he asked a student, tell me, student, where is God? The student, versed in Torah, said, God doesn't have a form, he's everywhere. So the Rebbe asked the question a second time, where is God? And he said, again, Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have goof, he doesn't have a body, so he's everywhere. And the Rebbe repeated again a third time, where is God? At that time, the student understood the Rebbe was trying to tell him something. He told him, I don't know. So the Rebbe told him, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present when we let him in and we open the door. When we let him in our lives, we are prepared to have a relationship without terms and conditions. Those come kind of later. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes in. If we put the terms and conditions before deciding whether to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then he doesn't come in. And leave us alone as we leave him alone. And that has been, Rabbi said, the stamp of Jewish identity. Nasser and Ishma, a stubborn tendency to cling to Jewish identity, to cling to Torah, to cling to mitzvahs. We found a beautiful example of that by female soldier Adam Berger. She managed to actually get a siddur during captivity, and a Hamas terrorist gave her the siddur, and she used it to daven HaKadosh Baruch Hu during her captivity. Is no more beautiful example of clinging to Torah and mitzvahs in such a dire situation. And may we also, in Ritzah Hashem, get from that some inspiration and bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Khalili. That was very interesting, very good talk there. Thanks to I will say goodbye to those on Zoom, but I'll just do